Well, I attended a memorial for a friend yesterday. His name was Dr. Billy Abraham. He was a professor at Perkins Theological School just up the road from here. He was a vibrant theologian and missionary, and to say that he was a conservative would be an understatement. He and I had breakfast every Sunday on our way to church for years when my children were young and I was trying to get out of the house before they woke up. And he and I were about as different on every religious topic as any two people could get. But we enjoyed each other, and as my doctoral advisor said to me a couple weeks ago when I saw him, he said, "You know, when you disagreed with Billy, he never held it against you." High praise these days. I will attend another memorial tomorrow at Temple Emmanuel for a friend I met through my participation at Planned Parenthood. He and I have been golfing together, which meant that we walked a lot together, many hours. He died 6 weeks after a cancer diagnosis. And so all this has me thinking of the people I've lost, which is why we're here today. So the dead don't die. So they live in us. And I've been thinking a lot about my dad lately. I want to show you a photo of him. This is my dad sitting next to the fireplace in his colonial home in Massachusetts. My dad died the day before we were all quarantined. Now about 19 months have passed. We buried his ashes this summer under an apple tree at my mom's house, this house in Massachusetts. We can take my picture down now. The tree where he's buried leans out of the center of the yard in two directions and is held together by a wire. Its apples are green and tart, hard as rock for wintering. The tree was planted there by an old farmer probably over 100 years ago. My dad rests there at its roots with his parents and my mom's parents, whose ashes were there, put there, ashes to ashes. My dad loved that place. He was an avid gardener. He plucked and planted and weeded and watered for days and weeks and hours to make a beautiful place more beautiful. Once when my mom admired a great blue heron who had come to fish in the creek that runs through the backyard, my dad found her a sculpture of a heron and put it near the creek. My children marveled at it for years as they swung back and forth in the tree, the apple tree, over their great-grandparents' ashes. The thing is that my dad and I were very different. It wasn't a perfect father-son relationship by any stretch of the imagination, but I knew he loved me, and that means something. We were different. My dad was never an athlete like I was. He couldn't throw a ball from this pulpit to that first pew. When he'd come to my baseball and basketball games, he'd comment on the colors of the teams or how the wind blew through the fence. And after the game, he'd ask, "Who won?" And I would roll my eyes and get to the car as fast as I could. He tried. He took me to professional games when I was a kid, and I was the one who watched the game, and he was off watching the concession guys coming and going. He tried. More than once, he also tried to get me to believe in myself. So many times when that wasn't possible. He stood by ready to help so many times. When I told him when I was in high school that I was going to work in sanitation, he said, "No, you aren't. You have something more important to do." I knew what he meant. When I graduated college and then seminary and then with a doctoral degree, he beamed with admiration. And he came to church here, and he sat actually where you are sitting, Laurel, in the third pew. When I preached, no other preacher was good enough for him. Sorry, Laurel. And because he didn't believe in himself sometimes, he stood there when we sang the hymns silently, smiling, beaming up at me. And afterward, he'd say, "It's amen, not amen." And I would say, "Is that so?" And he'd tell me I did a great thing this day in church. Every Sunday was the best Sunday I'd ever preached. For me, that echoed the childhood I had with too much praise, which carries its own scars. Even to today, it's hard for me to receive praise from anyone. I know that's different than many of you who didn't receive any, but still, it's something. The end of his life was rough. As the world was tipping toward quarantine and COVID, he was given a leukemia diagnosis here in Dallas. His only hope was to die in his home looking out the window at that apple tree. And the ice and the snow that covered everything in Massachusetts would make that impossible, so he stayed in my house. And when he fell out of bed a few times and started to lose control of his body, we moved him to hospice. Our final conversation before he went into a deep sleep and died was one I will never forget. He kept saying, "I don't know what to do. You know what to do. You're a minister. You're my minister." And I kept saying, "I know what to do. We're doing it. Don't worry." And I accepted the role of son and minister for that moment. And he told me things about his life I had never heard before. And he told me about each of my siblings and gave us instructions and gave instructions for his nephews and niece and my children. And we both burst into tears when he said, "Tell your son Gio he is the most courageous person I know." My dad said, "Here's what I want to leave with you. Try. Be happy. Be kind. Do good." He said he tried to live by these guidelines even when he failed at them. He said he did what he could. He was a devoted husband, sometimes not too nice. He was sick a lot. He told me maybe I could have tried better. The end was near as our conversation concluded. And he said, "Tell everyone." And I'm not sure if he meant tell all of you or just tell our family, but here we are at the pulpit on All Souls Day. He said, "Tell everyone. Dying is the hard part. Death is the easy part. That death is harder on all of you than on the one who dies." He said, "Leave behind happy memories." And he said, "I wouldn't see you in heaven. I don't believe in heaven. Eat, be merry, try to be happy, do good, be kind. Generosity saves us all." And I thought about that statement of heaven, and I half agree with him, but I don't make such claims about the afterlife here from the pulpit. I just try to remember what he said to me, to us, now to you. Try to be happy, be kind, do good. Generosity saves. And I remember him from time to time now in the strangest moments. I'm sure you have these kinds of things. My dad was a fine dentist. We miss him every time we have work done on our teeth. And a couple of months ago, I was getting a crown on this back molar after a root canal. And the hygienist was seating the crown, gluing it in, and she put that dental curing light into my mouth, that purple light that hardens the surfaces. And I had a vision of my dad at that moment. The hygienist was gone. In front of me, holding that instrument, was my dad. In a mystical moment, I was 7 years old, sitting in the dental chair of my dad's office in New Jersey, and he was 37 in front of me with his nifty new tool, fixing this broken tooth that I had broken, doing something crazy. His young face was staring at me and at my tooth. He was holding that magical light in my mouth, and for a moment I knew him again. He looked fulfilled. And I looked at him, and he looked in my mouth like he did so many times when I was a child. Be happy, kind, do good, generosity saves. And when I snapped out of that dream-like vision, the hygienist was telling me I could go. And I thought, heaven or no heaven, we can see the ones we love again from time to time. And we can live for them and through them as they live through us today. Next summer, we will sit around that tree and have a drink in the evening and watch the sun pass through the grasses and the thistles and the trees he planted, the willow, and remember him again and again. A few days after we put my dad's ashes under that tree and my siblings had all gone home, I got a call from my mom. She said a great blue heron had come every day for a week and was wandering around the apple tree where my dad and his parents are buried. And I asked my mom if the heron was pecking the ground around the area, and she said yes. And I said, must be Dad weeding the garden again. And we laughed. They lived so we could live. Be happy, kind, do good. Generosity saves. My colleague, now retired UU minister Richard Gilbert, wrote, "We belong to the great community of all souls, a long procession of humanity stretching back into time beyond our comprehension, sharing life with us in this time and space. We are privileged to be part of such a race of creatures," he said, "who have marveled at the miracle of birth, who have found meaning in the midst of life, who stand humbly before the mystery of death. We are servants of life and wish to be counted among those who will work for justice, love, and compassion." What I like about his words is his emphasizing our belonging to a great community of all souls. It is our privilege, he says, to be part of it, to stand humbly, to be counted. Today we collectively mourn and rejoice in a world that includes so many lives. We see them here staring back at us in these photos. Our lives and their lives. As we do each year, we invite the congregation to tread lightly on the human path of life and death, gain and loss, love and loneliness, despair and hope, and see each other. And see here a community of all souls. These souls up here on the boxes who stare back at us through the ages, our family and friends, companions on our journeys. And they are asking us to hold one another in this fragile experiment we call life. And so you are invited into a practice of remembrance today. Join us now in a time where we bless all who mourn and remember those who have gone. The first thing we do here is name and see the members of the church who died in the last 12 months since All Souls. We present their pictures here on the screens of the sanctuary, and we pass through this ritual with them. They are Larry Devers, Fred Garza, Chuck Goulding, Susie Hogue, John McCall, Sarah McGrath, and Rita Taubenfeld.
This year, our world lost so many people, young and old, as the COVID pandemic raged on. We hold that loss and the collective grief we are all experiencing due to the deaths of beloveds and strangers alike. Today, we remember all those connected to our church community who have died from COVID. They are Bob Berman, father of Larry Berman and longtime church staff member; Dolores Moore, grandmother of Aaron Moore; Donald Waddington, father of Helen Duran; Joan Lang Price, cousin of Marjorie Lang Neiman; David Saldana, brother of Sarah Saldana; Floyd Kerr, father of Christy Kerr Leonard; Roy Balter, father of Jeff Balter; Stephen Browning, uncle of Mark Shear; Kenneth Michael Brooks, brother of Barbara Fairfield; Allison Quintana, stepdaughter of Kathy Lake; and Felipe Ricarte Lopez, grandfather of Fatima Rangel.
I invite all those who are mourning the death of someone in your life who's died in the last 12 months, to stand as you are willing and able, and if not able, to raise both hands to the sky and have your neighbors hold them. So I ask you to stand if you have lost someone in this past 12 months. Those standing, if you wish to stabilize one way or another, feel free to request a hand from someone near you. And as you stand, I invite all of us to speak aloud the names of those you brought a photo of or are remembering today in this sanctuary now. Peter, Rick, Elizabeth. Mourners, we are your ballast, if you will let us be. We are here for you, acknowledge you today. May you be seated.
For all those named and unnamed we remember today, we read this meditation from our Jewish friends, a meditation for those who mourn. Will you join in the response? The response is, we remember them. Bless our memories now as
we remember them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and the chill of the winter,
we remember them.
In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring,
we remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer,
we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart,
we remember them.
When we have joys we yearn to share,
we remember them.
So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now part of us as
we remember them.
Friends, our ritual of remembrance doesn't end now, it continues with us in our hearts.